Jamie Lane, Hanson. Nice to meet you.
This will be in the middle.
So what is this up here? What are we doing?
Well, I think we must be going through each wine individually. My goodness. So I guess I just have to set up the taste and spit. Make sure that it tastes the way it's supposed to. Which wine are you
We have what we call M&N 2015. So we grow some Pinot Meunier, Pinot Noir. So we put them together. Yeah. And for Meunier and for Pinot Noir.
Looks like I might be the first one up, I think.
Is that, yeah, I guess I'm the last.
Well, we'll wake everyone up with a little Riesling.
Is that what this one is?
Yeah, you'll be able to tell. Probably Riesling.
Delicious. We'll wake you up.
I'm gonna have.
It's toothpaste right off your tongue.
Yeah, it's like pH is right around 3.
Yeah. Good feeling.
It's like you need a little sugar in.
You need that little sugar to balance it. How many grams?
It's 0.94%.
Okay.
So it's on the drier side.
It's there, but it's, what they say, it's about 8%, then you can start to taste, like 8 or above is when you really start tasting the sugar, but it's still perceived as pretty much.
Yeah. And now that I said that, let me just double check.
Yeah, I had to go through my notes and make sure I can remember everything.
Yeah, 9.4 grams per liter.
9.4.
I'd like to nerd out on some chemistry.
Yeah. Are you a chemist? Do you come from that side of the world?
Yeah, biology, chemistry.
Are you in biology?
Yep. So, pretty science nerdy about it.
Okay.
So do you come to Denver fairly often?
I do. I'm here almost every week. We got some different projects going on down here. So, how about you? Do you live here?
Yeah, I live here, but I'm the VP of sales
For the country? Or
Yeah, I saw that we were going to be on a panel together. I think it was Sunday before I left town on Monday. We went by the winery downtown. Yeah, and my wife and I saw some really nice jazz and tasted through some stuff.
Yeah,
Wines
yeah.
are awesome.
Also myself,
Yeah, we're really enjoying doing the jazz music. It's not enough just to do wine anymore.
I know that's true.
Okay.
And,
Gotta always have events going.
yeah, especially if you're in the city. It's kind of more convenient to do events when you're out in the country. Then you just kind of decide, okay, I'm just going to be open during the day, come out and taste, and then I'm done. 5 o'clock. But we have 3 full-time staff, and I want to keep them around.
Geez, Italy in May.
But yeah,
That's really bad. It's really a bad time to
December,
visit.
after being open
Visit
for 10
Italy.
years.
Wow.
We should probably do it, and so yeah, we're learning
so you're in Dundee.
in Dundee.
Wine
Now, are
I don't like being gone.
Oh, you moved
your
after?
makers
We
in
moved
Italy,
there
are they
in
in certain
2016.
But
areas?
you have
or
the
all-
vineyard
We're
still.
mostly
Yes, we have 2 right there in
Okay.
Bundy on Warden Hill Road.
Okay.
And then we have one in the Yoahan.
Arcadia.
Well, we make between 6,500 and 7,000 cases from hollering. And then, but we also custom crush, so we make wine for other
Oh,
people.
okay, north.
Our biggest client would be AP Wines.
We do have a couple of wineries.
And so the total throughput of the facility is,
Are they custom crushed?
Right, north.
So they're not making it at Summers anymore?
August Sellers.
August Sellers.
No, they've done 2 vintages with us now.
Not
Jessica music.
Okay. So you know,
Okay.
it's funny. I used to work at the National Psoriasis Foundation. Jessica used to work at Genentech.
Yeah.
So she was one of our pharmaceutical reps when I was at the
I
nonprofit.
heard she
We've got a
came from that
little
role.
bit of some crossover with that.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, she's so nice.
With our clients, total throughput of the winery last year was 11.6. 11,600 cases.
Okay.
7,000 for us and roughly 4,000
Good.
plus.
Yeah.
Who charge your
Yeah, I'm good parents.
It's $40 a case if you do
Right.
not want to bottle it in our facility. It's $45 a case if you
Exactly.
want to use our monoblock.
That's kind of our philosophy. And also, when we taste
So
the
you don't
wine,
charge
just
by
know
the
right away.
ton.
No, it's better case.
We call it
Yeah.
the smile quotient. Like if the
Yeah,
wine
better
doesn't
case.
pop, and you're like,
Because
wow,
there's loss that happens.
Yeah.
don't try to talk yourself into making something.
And that's total custom crush, no alternating. We do all the labor.
Yeah, we were lucky in the sense that when we were at Forest Edge, we created AP, and it just worked out because we had our own equipment. So like, we can't really, we were making the same fermentation.
Right.
So that was just kind of a fluke, and we were there for 6 years, and it was very expensive. So that's how we were. But now that we have our own place, we
You
have
can
to
kind
convert a warehouse into a winery. That
Not bad. So you're making 6,000 cases out of that facility.
out of that facility, and that's just about all we can do. Like,
So we have
not much
a
more.
70-acre
There's just not much
property.
more.
I've got 18 acres of vineyard, 1,500 case production.
Yeah, our old facility was really small.
You know, so I mean, the wine thing is not
There's
our
a guy
only deal.
that I knew from
You know,
Holland.
so
He
we're
doesn't work there
diversified.
anymore. So nice, and he.
It's 4.5 hours west of here.
If you said his
In
name,
what's
I
called the
would
North
know.
Fork Valley, which is south of Grand Junction.
He was like a
So
sales
Hodgkiss,
Aaron?
kind of
Aaron
Pan,
Coe?
Yes.
Cedar Edge.
Yeah, he worked for
kind of the
he worked with
area.
Casa Bruno.
Okay.
So he was with
South
Casa
of
Bruno
Grand
for a number of
Junction,
years,
about
and
an hour
then
and 15
we hired him for a sales rep.
Oh,
And then
okay.
he was with us for like a year.
Oh, so it wasn't that long. That must have been when I knew him.
Okay.
I'm supposed to go mushroom foraging with him when I get back.
Right in Denver, Swans Lake.
Say hi.
Yeah, that's basically where I live. We live in Slums Lake.
That's a cool area.
I love it. My wife and I bought a house.
I thought it was a little late too, but
It was
They're still
I'm
there.
confident there'd be some yellowfoot and some hedgehogs up in the mountains.
Wow.
and then they had to relocate.
Good for you. Nice house.
Yeah, it's a whole protected neighborhood. So they're doing a lot of
The great things about those two kinds of mushrooms is nothing else out there looks like them.
Okay.
So
houses in the neighborhood and
you
buildings.
kind of can't screw it up.
Really
But you're right, you got to be real careful.
But in our area, you can't do
Were you a maker?
I am not a winemaker.
Good.
My husband is the winemaker.
'Cause there is
I will
boy
definitely
closer
make
to
that
full
very
time.
clear. So when it comes to technical questions, I can only answer what I know. But
Can put your husband.
he's on the road right now. So he's in South and North Carolina because we sell our wines in a lot of different
Okay.
states. And so these two things just overlapped.
Okay,
And he
they
said,
mix different tastings.
yeah, and he's like, okay, you go to Denver and I'll go to South
Interesting.
Carolina.
So is your family been there?
So,
You mainly sell in US?
No.
yes,
My
sell to
family,
3 provinces in
my
Canada.
parents and my
That's
sister
about our
bought
only
the
exporting
property,
that we
which is part
have.
of a
We've been
bigger
trying.
cow
There was a company in England
which is
that was
sort of the
interested, and it didn't
traditional
work out. There
agriculture
was a company in
for this
Norway.
area. You know, it's really cattle.
Other reasons it
Cattle
didn't work out. Like
ranches,
you said, some kind of
and
lottery
then
system.
orchards. I
They
mean,
did our
there are-
wines
we
and
used to
really
be a
liked them,
fairly
but the
sizable
government
apple
selects the
growing
wines that come
region
in or
for the
something
western
like that.
United States
And
until
they
the 50s.
wanted a drier style.
So Skyland brand was one of the biggest in the
We
United
didn't get in,
States, biggest
but
apple
our
juice
wines do
brands.
quite well in
Why did that
Montreal,
Based in,
Okay.
which is a good
well, you
Quebec.
know, combination of things.
And then-
you know, World War II came
Monopoly or
along, and then I mean, they had a couple of bad weather years.
I don't know about the
but
stores. I know
think
for sure
that the
restaurants, but I
move
don't
toward
know.
industrial agriculture
Sibioska
and
is the name of
globalization
the
that
company, and
came
then we also
following
send
World
wine
War
to
II.
Winnipeg,
Okay.
Canada,
I mean, it pushed everything
and
to the Central Valley
Manitoba, and
and
then
Yakima.
oh, we
Washington.
kind of
In
stopped
fact, the
sending it to
biggest
these other places.
apple
They just
growing
couldn't
family
afford it.
in Delta
Okay, so
County.
really 2 places.
They are now the biggest apple
And about 27,
growing
28
family
different
in Washington.
we sent to.
They actually, you know, they were sort of
Yes,
the
I
ones
mean, I'd love
that,
to sell most of it.
kind of got the
The
apple
reality
growing
is,
industry off the
it
ground
actually really
after
helps
World
to have
War
your
II.
wines in
It
different
came
states
from
because people travel all the time.
Colorado,
And wine
and the Colorado
Chicago,
industry
and now
collapsed.
Portland, and they're like, oh, I want to go visit.
Was
there.
it
So we
Because of
try
the
to
weather
obviously-
mainly, you can't do
the
these
state
industrial
who sell more
deals
in US.
in a
Oregon.
climate like Colorado.
We're right on the margins.
Minnesota.
We're very marginal,
Awesome.
right?
Interesting,
It's
but I think it
high
has more to
risk.
do with the personality behind the guy that's
The shoulder seasons, it can kill you.
Yeah, and
loves
so
their
it's
wines,
everything. I think what
buys
what
a ton of
what
it.
the Colorado
All the
fruit
time, Barnaby
industry is slowly
market.
learning is
So
that we really have to
that's the
focus
relationship
on
between
being unique, right? Having trying to get a premium
Located
because of our
in the
small
center of Italy,
by being
between
different, by
Florence and Siena,
differentiating
the
ourselves
Chianti area.
versus being a low price
Very
leader,
hilly
which is
area,
what they
very
do on
continental climate. We're quite far away from the ocean. It's a small winery, it's a third generation winery. I have 30 acres of vineyards.
Well, that's a market-driven thing. That's
mostly
all. It's
export.
kind of like in the wine
My domestic
industry.
market
The
is
big
very
box,
little.
right?
Okay.
The big box
I sell quite a lot in
retailers.
US.
I think the chain stores dictate what varieties are going to sell. So
Like 10 years ago, never.
We sell in about 20 countries.
But now it's like one of the most popular
Right.
apples in the grocery
Wow.
store.
Right.
And they're
I
delicious.
know there's a lot of paperwork involved.
Yes.
And you're filling out paperwork in
To Rob.
About 5
You
years.
know, it's busy when you start,
Yeah.
but then when you get used to do it's become
You get used
Yeah,
to it.
so-
easier.
Yeah.
it's a different.
So we're in the US.
But,
I
I think
have
the
volume
craft
imports
movement,
in
craft food movement, is
here in
definitely
Colorado. I have
creating opportunity
classic
for
wines in
kind of the small
California.
fry
I
producer.
have Oregon brand manager in Oregon.
We have
They are
some
more
really good
focused about
grower partners
Oregon
as well.
wines.
I make cider
Oh, yeah,
and
understand.
spirits from fruit.
Then I have
so,
variety
we've
wine
got some
in New York.
I don't
New
have
Jersey,
orchards. I've
Pennsylvania.
got about 150
I
trees.
sell in
What do you
Florida
call
to
that?
ABC stores.
It's kind of a
There
mix
is a
of
big chain of
stuff that
retailers.
I'm playing
of
around
ABC.
with.
So I mainly
but
sell
I
there in
source
Florida.
fruit
I'm
from
going very
two of
well,
the-
but I don't sell
probably,
the
I
best.
think, two of the best,
Sell most
certainly the
stores.
best Colorado growers, Steve Ela.
And I have a small importer in
And they
Chicago.
each have about 100
Nice.
acres of fruit. They're good size.
This is not busy. I sell quite a lot.
Their deals
50%
are
of
working.
my
I also source from a biodynamic farm in
And I sell to Canada,
the
yes.
Anderson Valley,
But do you do the
California,
paperwork
Filigree,
yourself?
which
No.
okay.
I do
Biodynamic
someone that
apple
works for me in the
growers.
office. He's American.
Oh,
He's
okay.
from Woodstock, New York.
yeah, they're
Okay.
certified. I mean, there may be
No,
more in
I,
Vermont, New York.
in the
They're not
office,
certified, but I don't
less I stay in the
know.
office and better
They
it is.
are.
I do only that.
Demeter
Yes,
is
I
Only one
understand.
maker.
There's
Yeah.
River and
So
Filigree Farm. We get all
it's
of
really
the
not my,
seconds from Filigree
it's really not my job.
in the Anderson
Yeah.
Valley. It's called New
Yeah, it's the
Avalon.
same with Barnaby. He,
Yeah, very small, niche.
he's not very good at paperwork. And so all that boring stuff.
Yeah, he's boring
The
stuff.
bigger stores.
Yeah, I mean, there's reports you have to do.
You know, it's
So, but I actually ended
Yeah, I
up
mean,
hiring
that's
somebody because I was doing so much.
it's an interesting market.
Wine club and marketing
You
and
ask
sales.
9 out of 10 consumers
That
about cider, and
somebody to do all my
they're thinking these things that I call
monthly
apple
reports
coolers.
and figuring out how many taxes I
That's a different
It's worth every
game
penny.
where different taste profile and a lot more expensive.
I was at a natural 1 week in Colorado 2 years ago. I didn't do the conference. This is my first time I do the conference.
I've got an agreement with all of my neighbors that after they're done picking the apples they want to eat,
Yeah.
they'll call me up and I'll come by.
I will go to California next week.
10 gallons. Yeah. And I played
In
around
San Francisco to Los Angeles.
wild
Nice.
yeast and different yeasts.
Who are you with in California?
It's called classic wine.
Oh, classic wines. You mentioned that.
They're quite good. They're mostly specialized in American wines.
Oh,
But
okay.
they are growing also with Italians. They're very well organized all around California. Is California good for you?
Yes. It
So how are
used
things
to be
in Dundee
better.
these days?
Great.
I
Growing.
think our distributor now
Yeah, I
is
bet.
buying.
Yeah,
You
seems
get,
like
so
there's new ones.
Dundee's not too
So
far
we're getting a little
from Portland.
That's right. It's about 45 minutes south.
Yeah,
Kind
so
of,
it's not
yeah,
like
we're
it's
noticing
becoming a
that. So
suburb.
we just did a tasting.
I wouldn't go that
Sure,
far.
you wouldn't.
No.
People aren't commuting yet to.
No, no. So the thing we have in Portland are pretty strict growth boundaries, and so we don't have this kind of
Which is
sprawl
great,
that
right.
eats up the
Yeah.
surrounding
But
area.
he's
I mean, you'll be in the
just
city,
bringing
and then
all these
bam, you're in
brand new
farmland.
And I think Oregon is like that.
That is also what I like of
They've been very good
US, that
about
the buyers
protecting.
are always very young and they change all the time.
It's good.
That's true. So I live in the very southwestern part
Yeah.
of
Because
Portland.
maybe you're selling very
And
well
it's
in
a
the
45
restaurant,
minute
Yeah.
drive.
now you change and you're out,
Right.
So I'm out
you
here.
can
Okay.
Find
go.
somebody
I'm
else.
going
I
against
think
trend.
the old school
Now,
guard,
now
like
I
sommeliers
visited,
who only it was
last time I
impossible
was in that
to get them
area,
to even taste your wine. They were just not interested. They
a
had their
while
brands
ago.
that they worked with,
And
so they
so
weren't
I
open to
visited,
it.
I spent a
So it
lot
was
of
really
time
hard at that
at a
time.
place called
And now it's a little bit of the
Mazara
opposite. Like the new
Yep.
kid on the block
Sure.
gets all the attention.
I've met Mary a few times.
You know,
Where
there's
is that in
articles about
relation
winemakers
to?
since the first or second
Is that
vintage,
south
and they're getting like
Dundee?
Yeah, it's gonna be south.
and
Okay.
wine and spirits, and you know they're doing this.
Pretty
huge
close
thing
though.
called
I mean, you're right in the area.
It's kind of that is the area, that same area. Yeah.
30 winemakers.
But we're right in the heart of the Dundee Hills.
40
Okay.
winemakers in Asia.
Pretty
And
area.
I'm like,
That's beautiful.
well, are you gonna start doing 50 and 50 or 60 or 60? You know, it's like their age really.
Yeah, no, things are going great.
I mean,
Yeah.
Alright, well, we're going to have a few more people trickle in,
Is
but
this
just want to
the,
welcome everyone to our 2019 National Wine Week seminar, Digging Deeper. So we're going to dig deep into the natural topics, hot topics we're all thinking about. And we have an amazing panel with us today. We have Piero from Pogerino in Tuscany, Olga from Teutonic in Oregon, Mark from Holleran in Oregon, Lance from our local Jackrabbit Hill, and Jamie from the Sorting Table, importer of amazing wines from Burgundy all the way to New Zealand, which is in one of your glasses today. So I'll have everyone introduce themselves and the wine we'll be pouring. We'll be pouring one wine from each panelist throughout the day. And at the end, we'll have about 15 minutes for question and answer. But if you do have a few minutes to stick around, we'll have a little bit of time for networking if there are additional questions after the panel ends. So with no further ado, Piero, if you want to let us know about yourself and your wine.
Yes, so hello to everybody. Sorry for my English that is not great. So I'm Piero Lanza. I am the owner and winemaker of Pogerino. Pogerino is a third generation winery, used to be of my grandfather, then went to my parents. And I ran this winery since 1988. So 88 was my first vintage. Actually, the reason why I started to be organic in my winery and to do natural wine in my winery, this was 15 years ago, is because I think that the land where I work is mine on a piece of paper, but it's of everybody. So when we do this job, we must do less pollution as possible. The people that do the job I do as winemaker, vineyard manager, we have this big responsibility to do less pollution as possible. About my wines, I have 30 acres of vineyards, so it's a small vineyard, it's a small winery in the heart of Chianti area between Florence and Siena. It's a very hilly area, very continental climate. We have in summertime we have hot days but very cool nights, the reason why we have this big gap of temperature is for the altitude. We are very high. We are about 500 meters high, with a lot of forest around. 80% of my land is forest. So the combination of forest and altitude bring this big gap of temperature. And we have also very, very rocky ground. We have this schist ground called galestro in Italian. Is a schist rock that broken in the ground and make a lot of minerality in our wines and drain the ground also very much.
And we'll taste the mineral in the wine we're showing from you, which, were you touching on the wine that you're showing today?
Yes, yes. So the wine that I will show you today is I call it my business card, because in total I produce in Poggerino about 65,000 bottles of the wine you will have today. I do 45,000 bottles. It's Sangiovese grape, 100%, and vineyards between 10 to 25 years old. And it's a blend of different clones of Sangiovese that come from my winery. And it's, of course, it's a wild-yeast fermentation. It's fermented in concrete tanks and aged a year in oak. I share the aging between big barrels, Slavonian oak, and Tonneau French oak. But it's all used oak. Because my wine, as me, we are allergic to the new oak. So I don't like to drink the wine with oak.
So we'll taste his red wine in just a few minutes. But Olga, you'd like to give a...
Sure. My name's Olga Tuttle, and I'm with Teutonic Wine Company. And Teutonic means anything that is Germanic. It's kind of an old-fashioned word to use. The company is me and my husband, Barnaby Tuttle. He's the winemaker. And we're an urban winery located in Portland, Oregon. We produce about 6,000 cases. We don't own any of our own vineyards, unfortunately, but we do source a lot of fruit from the Willamette Valley. And the way we all got started actually was on a whim. My husband was a wine buyer for a restaurant, and someone came in and poured him all these German Rieslings, specifically from the Middle Mosel, and a switch went off, and he just fell in love with these beautiful Rieslings with the terroir focus, the balance. And he literally said to me, I need to quit my job and learn how to make wine. And I'm like, okay, let's see how that goes. But being my husband, who he is, he's tenacious. He started reading up on wine and learning about it and started dinking around in the basement. And we finally made our first vintage in 2008. We actually planted a vineyard in 2005 on a friend's farm. Didn't know what we were doing. We did get some help from friends, and after 3 years, we were able to produce enough Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Pinot Blanc to make a few barrels. And after the barrels were made, my husband said, you know, we have to sell this wine, and I think we need a winery license, and I think we need to become a company. So everything we did sort of came backwards. But here we are today in 2019. We produce 6,000 cases. We make a lot of different wines. Single vineyards, one-offs, blends. So we have about 30-something SKUs. So if you ever come to Portland and visit us, we can sit you down for 2 hours and pour you through our wines. But stylistically, Barnaby really kept to what he believed in, the way the wines are made in the Mosel Valley. So even our Pinot Noirs are in the Riesling bottle, which is typical to Germany and Alsace. Our house style is our white wines tend to be a little bit off dry with a little residual sugar, but a lot of acid to balance it out. So, you know, we're talking about foods that are spicy, hot, Szechuan, curry, or even fatty, salty foods. Our white wines really go well with that.
And we'll taste your rosé today.
Yeah,
Could
yeah.
you let us know a little bit about your rosé?
Thank you. Oh, right now?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. So our rosé is made with 100% Pinot Noir. There's no Saignée. We actually make it like we make our red wines. We just leave it on the skins for 24 hours for maceration to give it that light pink color, and then we press it off. And then all our wines get barrel fermented in neutral oak barrels. We actually don't have any stainless steel tanks.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Olga and Marc.
Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. My name is Marc Lacasse. I'm the winemaker with Holler & Vineyard Wines. Holler & Vineyard Wines' first vintage was in 1999, so this is our 20th year. And next month, I'll start my 14th year with the company, and I've been a winemaker since 2010. We're located in Dundee, Oregon. We have 3 vineyards that we farm organically and biodynamically, 2 in the Dundee Hills AVA and 1 in the Eola Amity Hills AVA. All 3 vineyard sites are volcanic parent material soil called Jory. We do mostly Pinot Noir, of course, but we also make Chardonnay, Riesling, which you're going to try today, and also a Spanish grape called Tempranillo. So I like to say that we're 100% vertically integrated from pruning all the way to bottling. We do everything ourselves in-house. We don't use any contract labor for our vineyards. Our vineyard crew works for us year-round, and we have our own bottling line, and so we control all aspects of what we do. The wine you're going to try today is a 2016 Riesling from our Le Pavillon vineyard in the Dundee Hills. It was planted in 1972. It's one of the older Riesling vineyards in the state. It is fermented in stainless steel, and it has about a little less than 1% residual sugar.
My name is Lance Hanson, and I have Jackrabbit Hill Farm in Hotchkiss, Colorado. We started in 2001. It's a diversified farm. We have a 70-acre property, 18 acres of vineyard, and so we have a small bottled wine program. We do about 1,500 cases a year of wine that we farm biodynamically on the property. We also make cider. We have New Avalon Grower cider, which is, like our wines, made sort of following the old world cider traditions. We also do Caprock gin, vodka, and brandy there. So we're a house of booze in Western Colorado. Come see us if you're ever in the area. The wine that we're pouring today is called M&N 2015. So M stands for Pinot Meunier. So we have a small block of Meunier on the property, and N for Pinot Noir. And so we put the two together. The 2015 vintage is really heavy on the Meunier. We do not field blends of these. These are cellar blends, and we do them after fermentation. So we look at the wines each year and see how they are, and then determine the percentage of Pinot versus Meunier. And so you'll have a chance to try the 2015 today.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Jamie Adams. I'm the VP of Sales for a company called The Sorting Table. We are an importer and marketer of fine wines, mostly from Italy and France, but we do represent one South African winery, one New Zealand winery, which will be tasting the Sauvignon Blanc from Saracen Estate today, and a couple of domestic wineries as well. We work with small family-owned growers who farm sustainably, organically, or biodynamically. The members of my team, the sales team, are all past sommeliers or chefs, so we're always looking for wines that are acid-driven, clean, pretty naturally made wines that go well with food.
Wonderful.
There we go.
So jumping right in, the first question we'll direct to everyone on the panel. We'll move into a few individual questions. But the big question of the day, so natural wine we think of as, is it cloudy, is it funky, is it barnyard, is it low sulfur, low alcohol, or is it really a way of life, right? Is it a whole mentality? So in short, is natural wine a style or a philosophy? Piero?
I must be the first. Well, I think natural wine, I must say that natural wine, when I speak about natural wine, first of all, I think about the vineyards. I mean, the start of everything is always the vineyards. So the philosophy is to work in the vineyards organically, in the best way, don't following fashion, and then when you get a great grape from the job you did in the vineyards, you can work naturally with the wine making. But again, the winemaking of natural wine must be done with a serious project. So it's a choice of life. You have. I'm sorry for the words I use. You have always. You have to merit this kind of job. This kind of philosophy, and try to do the best try to do the best in the cellar, fermenting the grape in the best way. So this is my idea. I've always done in my job, I've always had in my job the idea of a project and not the idea to follow the fashion that maybe this year is on one way and the year after is another way.
Okay, thank you.
I agree. I think natural wine is a philosophy, although there are certain things that you can do in starting in the vineyard to make natural wines. You know, of course, it's obvious we don't want to use pesticides, herbicides, Roundup. So there are sort of a criteria that I think makes a natural wine. But I think it goes beyond just the vineyard in the cellar. I think it's also how you treat people, how you treat your employees, how you live your life. There could be, I'll give you an example of a person who might be doing all the right things in the vineyard, and they might be biodynamic, but they're a real jerk, you know, and they go game hunting in Africa or something. I'm not going to buy those wines. So I think it's a holistic approach. So it's starting in the vineyard, continuing in the cellar, and then continuing on in everything that you do and everyone that you come into contact with. So, and as we know, there really isn't a definition of natural wine. We've never really put one together. So I think it's up to the individual to decide what makes your wine natural wine.
Well, I'll be the third person to agree. It's definitely a philosophy for us. I mean, our whole goal is for the vineyard and the vintage to show itself by the time it gets to the bottle. And of course that starts in the vineyard with organic and biodynamic farming, really low input farming, and translates into the winery. We try to do as little as possible. And I mean, I don't really view myself as a wine maker as much as like a wine shepherd. It's just my job to kind of guide the wine to where it's going to go. And hopefully it shows the vineyard, and the vintage variation is very important to us. And so in that sense, it's very much a philosophy for us.
So the natural wine label or category is great because we accidentally fell into it and we benefited from it, but I have to admit that that was not on our minds when we started making wine. I mean, there is a philosophy component to what we're doing, but bottom line for Jackrabbit Hill is we just felt like we were in a really interesting, very risky growing area, but to the extent that it was risky and marginal, had the potential to create some different products. And so for us, really it's all about trying to create a product that is a pure, true expression of a really interesting growing region. And that means, letting nature fully influence the fruit. So we grow the grapes. We don't want to use synthetic fertilizer like concentrated nitrogen or things like that, because it's like using steroids. You're going to artificially develop your body, and what we want is a plant and a fruit that has figured out on its own, that has the intelligence on its own to survive in that climate, and the result is going to be a pretty interesting flavor profile in the fruit. So the way you do that is through low input farming, and likewise, if we start out with naturally expressive grapes, we don't want to screw with it in the cellar. We want to, I think as you said, just sort of shepherd the process. So using these really fancy isolated yeasts and enzymes, and some of this stuff today is really sophisticated. You could do a lot in terms of shaping the result in the wine. We don't want to do that, right? We want to let the grape in its own natural kind of inclination express itself in fermentation, end up with a product that's as clean and pure an expression of that place as we can get.
Great. And as the guy who has to, basically tell the story and sell the wines, when it comes to talking about natural wine, within our portfolio, we have a spectrum, and it kind of depends, what is the definition of natural wine, right? So we have 4 producers, growers, we like to call them, the wineries that we work with in the portfolio who use, they're biodynamically farmed, organically farmed, and certified. They use wild yeast fermentation. Some of them use no temperature control when it comes to the fermentation, the aging of the wine, no filtration or fining as well, and they release the wines basically when they feel they're ready. And then we have the other spectrum that does use some sulfur addition at the end before bottling, and we'll use temperature-controlled fermentations. To us, it's more important how they're stewards of the land. We represent mostly European wineries from families that have lived on the property, sometimes going back hundreds of years, or at least 5, 6, maybe 10 generations. And they see themselves as stewards of the land, not owners. They're there for a short period of time. They inherited it from their uncles and parents and grandparents, and they're going to pass it on to their children. And they have gone, in some instances, gone back to the way things were done 100 years ago before mechanized farming and the use of chemicals, which became very popular after the post-war period. In some instances, they've never used those techniques, and they're doing the thing that their family's been doing for hundreds of years. So for us, it's more important what happens in the vineyard, and I think that's more important to our wineries as well. And then basically having a hands-off approach and very little manipulation once you get into the winery. It's a pure expression of the best that you could do that year with the fruit.
Great.
To me.
Yeah, excellent. And if you haven't started tasting, dive in. We're not going to do a wine tasting at all. We're going to jump in. Next question is directed to Lance. So is there a vintage or a condition that happened with weather that forced you to not pursue your natural path? That you had to use more sulfur, or you had to use an additive of some sort?
So as far as the grapes and the wine go, we've been really lucky. We've always done a native yeast or spontaneous fermentation. So we started doing we got into the biodynamic program through Demeter, the certifier here in the United States, in 2006. So we've been making wine naturally since then, and we've never had a failed fermentation. We had, in 2009, one of our wines, Mitzi's Riesling, started fermenting in the fall of 2009 and took 6 years to ferment. And so we had that yesterday at the tasting. And it was really an interesting experience. Scary, because that's never happened to us before. But basically what happened was and our cellar temperatures where everything ferments is pretty cold. So it's 55 degrees. Sometimes the winter will get down to 45. So that'll slow ferments down because these are always anywhere between 3 and 6 months fermentations, typically. But this one took 6 years. And what happened was it started to ferment and then it fell asleep. And it woke up. And it fell asleep, and it woke up, and it did that for 6 years until it was dry. And never moved it from the vat, made a very small amount, just a couple thousand liters, which that's kind of our largest vat size. We do things in real small vats. And so that was and as it turned out, I think it's a really interesting wine, but that's the example of our most challenging. All's well that ends well, but it took 6 years.
So Olga, question about scalability. So natural wine, we think of boutique, small production. How small do you need to be? What is the cap? How big can you get and still be natural without compromising the philosophy of natural wine?
Well, that's a tricky question. Well, the first thing I want to say is I really don't believe in points or scale systems. So for me, it's just like I hope it doesn't happen. So scalability, I guess we could create a standard for natural wine and say, okay, these are the 10 things that you need to do or not do to make it a natural wine. And if you check off 7 things, then you're a number 7 out of 10. But like I said, there's so many other aspects to natural wine. It's not just not using chemicals. It's not just using lower sulfur. It's a lot of things. It's your life. It's how you take care of the vineyard, how you take care of other people. So someone might rate an 8 or 9 on the checklist, but then another person only rates 7, but then they do other things that no one ever thought of. You know, when we started making wine, the buzzword of natural wine didn't even exist. So we just started making wine, and the vineyard that we planted, we were just doing things that we felt was the right thing to do. So we introduced indigenous plants, and we did these seed balls, and we threw them all over the vineyard, and we made this ground cover that was, you know, had micronutrients for the soil. We only mowed, we didn't till, so all the cuttings went back into the soil. We got some apiaries that we set up, and we used the Ware hives, so those are more natural for the bees. And we only collected the honey one time, and after that I'm like, just let them keep it. I don't want to go through that again. Too many bees died, it felt terrible. So I think that all these things that we do and that these other producers do that make it what it is, the big players, what's really scary about them is that they have the money to do anything they want. So, you know, I think of Walmart when they joined the organic produce game. You know, I think they were sitting in a boardroom saying, you know, this organic thing's really taken off, so how can we make our produce organic? And then they find out, what does it take to get that certification and the stamp? But are they doing other things that's holistic? I mean, we know they underpay their employees. We know that they stop the hours at 39 so no one qualifies for health insurance. And, you know, all the board people get, you know, millions of dollars in bonuses. So even though that says organic on the vegetable, does that make their produce any more sustainable or better than a local farmer who doesn't have the stamp and just farms sustainably and locally and organically? So getting to that number, that finite number, I mean, I think if they really wanted to, they could do it, but I don't think it would be in their best interest financially to do it that way, because we take so much more time. I mean, 6 years for, you know, a fermentation, they're not going to wait 6 years. And even that's a bit for us. We probably would have pushed it through. But you know, to do it right, you need time and patience, and you can't push things. And I just think the larger scale wineries, you know, they're turn and burn, and they want the wines to be on the market by a certain time. Maybe they could have a small section of their winery where they only do this type of wine and can put more attention to it. So a numbers game, you know, it's really hard for me to say. We make 6,000 cases, and for us it's a lot of work. If we were to grow, I don't think I want to grow. I think 6,000 is just about what we can handle properly.
Yeah. Okay, great. Mark, next question for you.
Sure.
So, difficult question. Is there a mistake you made along the way, or in the learning curve?
Of course.
Making natural wine? Is there something you can share with us?
Well,
Caught you by surprise?
sure. Yeah, of course. Well, I'll tell you about a learning curve we had. The 2013 vintage for us was kind of a tale of two vintages. It was a warm, pretty average growing season. Everything started just fine. And about 2 weeks into the harvest, we had an atmospheric river come through Oregon. And in the span of 1 week, it dumped 8 inches of rain. And so nobody could pick. You couldn't get tractors into the vineyard. And so some vineyards lost their entire crop that year. It was, for us, a real nightmare, especially if you're farming organically and biodynamically. You can't spray these crazy pesticides that have like a 2-week, you know, pre-harvest interval and will just wipe out any kind of disease pressure that's there. So when our fruit started to come in, there was a lot of splitting in the berries, which opened it up to botrytis, fruit fly damage, a lot of fruit fly damage. And so my point is it's important not to be dogmatic in the whole natural thing. I had to change the game plan. We stopped doing cold soaks because the wines were just starting to ferment in a real funky way. We're talking lots of VA, lots of ethyl acetate. You know, so we upped our SO2 at the crusher. We used commercial yeast on day 1. We didn't even wait. We inoculated right away. It was really, really difficult. And so it's important to be flexible in relationship to what's going on, because at the end of the day, my job is to put a drinkable solid wine that can age for a few years in bottle. And so that was a really difficult year.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Piero, so terroir, the term we all love to use. So if terroir is a combination of grape, climate, and human intervention, does natural wine inherently accentuate or diminish terroir?
I think both, because if a winery work well in the vineyards to get a balance in the plant, and so to get balance grapes, and then ferment in a good way the grape, this is definitely an advantage for the terroir. So in this way, the wine that come from is definitely a wine that show in the best way the potential of the land. If the winemaker just ferment grape, for me wine is not fermented grape. For me wine is culture. So if the wine is made in the best way, this increase. Otherwise, it's the opposite. So I can tell you my experience. When I was 19 years old, I started to do the job. I was coming out from an agricultural school that used to teach me that the chemistry was the only way to manage the vineyards. With the chemistry, we was able to keep all in control. So when I started to make the job in '88, I used to use chemical. Absolutely, I used to use herbicides in the vineyards. I used to use synthesis products in the vineyards because they teach me this. Then working in the vineyards, year by year, I became more and more sensitive about my job. I was looking the plants that was not happy. My plants was not happy. I was not happy. My workers was not happy to work with chemicals we used to spray on the vineyards. So I slowly start to take out more and more, and taking out, I start to see better and better results. And then 50 years ago, I say, okay, I must jump on the other side, so I must be 100% organic. And the feeling is that with the organic agriculture, the plants are more reactive to this crazy climate that we more and more have. I don't know if you have the same here in US, but in Europe, we are having more and more up and down. We come from very hot years to very cold years, from very lots of rain, very dry. In general, if I put the last 15 years together, the way is on the way of the heating. And so the organic agriculture helped to make wine, grape more stronger, so better able to be react to this extreme climate condition. And after that, in the cellar, if you do natural wine with this grape, using wild yeast, try to select the grape in the best way, try to understand the vineyards and pick the grape in the best way. Definitely this increase the taste of the land, absolutely. But unfortunately, I must say that I taste many natural wine that are very boring. So, and I think that in the world we have enough boring wine. So we should try to do interesting wine with personality.
I love it. Jamie and Mark, this question is directed to both of you. Are buzzwords, so as a retailer or a restaurateur, when someone comes in and says, I want natural wine, I want vegan wine, I want the wine that doesn't give me headaches, sulfite free, are all of these buzzwords good and driving business to more independently owned businesses?
I think there's a little bit of both, because as an industry, we have a tendency to make things very, very complicated. Like, try to study Italian wine law, right? Like, try to wrap your mind around that. That's something that's constantly changing. Those of us who are professionals in the business, just trying to stay up with terminology and rules and appellations and producers is very, very difficult. And you start talking about styles of wine, winemaking, or winemaking practices like natural wine. When consumers hear about it, I think we all probably in the room, if we went around the room and you said, what does natural wine mean to you? We might have maybe a dozen different interpretations of exactly what that means, and the importance of it. And then when you get to the public, who they don't do this for a living, but they hear about natural wine and it sounds appealing, then I think it can be confusing for them as well. What exactly does that mean? And they want a definition. We don't really have a set definition of what that means. There's no certification body that says, puts a stamp on the back of the bottle and says natural wine. To me, it's important because I like to tell stories. There's a lot of great wine out there in the world. And just because my wine got 90 points and, has a cool package doesn't mean you should necessarily buy it. I want to give you a reason, a story behind the people. So for me, talking about natural winemaking is talking about the care that goes into making the wine, talking about the process that the winemakers go through. And to me, just how much energy and effort they put into producing the best possible wine at the end of the year. So, I don't know. That probably didn't answer the question very well. Probably raised more questions, but that's how I feel.
Well, I'll tell you that this is the first time I've been out of the cellar and on the road in 6 years, so I kind of feel like a hermit. I don't really know what's super hip out there. I came from the retail wine world, but that was like 13 years ago. I'm a little uncomfortable with some of these buzzwords because they don't really have a definition. People can put whatever they want onto it, and that is not always the best thing. But I do think it's good that it's getting people talking about wine and thinking about wine that's made with more care towards the land and lower input wines that are hopefully healthier for you. But I think one of the things on the questions you sent us was like this term headache-free. Do people really use that term? For real? That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I think that's terrible.
I was talking to the winemaker at Saracen Estate, Tamara, and I kind of put the questions through to her, like see what she thought as well. And she said the only headache-free wine is a wine that has 0% alcohol. So that's usually where the headache comes from. I'm sorry, it's not your sulfite allergy. We have had a couple of instances. I'm not going to name any names, and we don't work with those producers anymore, unfortunately. Sometimes you are taking a risk. I even had a domestic Pinot Noir producer that I worked with the previous company that was making all natural wines, and I think they may have skipped something in the winemaking process, but they had a very beautiful $50 retail Pinot Noir that was re-fermenting in the bottle. Sparkling Pinot Noir is great if it's champagne, but if it's still red wine, it's not exactly what you want when you pop the cork at the table. So, I think that is a bit of a risk, but to speak specifically about the four, I would say most natural winemakers in my portfolio that I work with, Pascal Roblet from Roblet Minot and Volnay. He takes great care, as does Enzo Pontoni at Miani. They're completely natural. They use ambient temperatures in their cellars, wild yeast fermentation, no sulfur additions, but they take a lot of time with the winemaking. And they go through and taste the barrel over and over and over again. They don't move the wine around. They really just put the wine in the barrel and let it sit. And they won't release a wine until they feel that it's stable. I think that if you put that kind of effort into it, then you can make a good clean wine. And also, Enzo Pontoni is really, from Miani, is notorious for this. We'll go taste with him. We'll taste, 15 different wines, and he'll release 7 because the other 8 they weren't good enough. And I sold them off to somebody else. So we're like, but that single vineyard Sauvignon was great. He's like, yeah, when it came time to bottle, I tasted it. Nope, not good enough. So he won't put his name or his reputation on that wine. But he will make it completely naturally, and not, once you put something out in the market and it's bad, it's out there forever. That's probably going to end up in a store or in someone's cellar. They're going to go back to it in 10 or 15 or 20 years and go, man, he really screwed that up. And so the wineries that we represent that farm naturally and farm, I should say, organically and biodynamically and make their wine naturally are very, very careful about what they finally send out to the market. And the ones that weren't careful, like I said, they don't come through the sorting table anymore. Yeah.
Very glue wine here for $60, $70, $90 a bottle for this style of light, easy drinking natural wine?
Well, I think that because a wine is easy to drink, doesn't want to say that it is not complex. So sometimes it's much more difficult to produce wine that looks like easy than wine that looks like complex. I always do an example when you listen, even if you are not used to listen classic music, you listen Mozart. Mozart, it's approachable for everybody because it's easy to listen, but try to read Mozart. So with most of the time, these wines come from a great job in the vineyards on the way of the balance, and also risk in the cellar, fermenting in extreme way. So if these wines show really a personality, so show a character, maybe are wines that are not perfect. Maybe they have a little bit of VA, and maybe they have just a touch. I don't love bread, but they have just a touch of bread. They are great, very complex, and I think you should pay the price. At the same time, maybe are wines that are very expensive, that they, as I was saying before, they are not well done, and they don't have that value. But again, because a wine has body, has structure, doesn't want to say that it's a great wine. In the same way, a wine that is light maybe is a great wine. We have an example of, well, now it's different, but we have an example of fantastic Burgundy that are very, very light, also sometimes easy to drink, but are fantastic wine that can be from the acidity and from the quality of the tannins. So it's not a question of quantity, it's a question of quality of the tannins. They can age for many, many years.
Wonderful. So I think Olga touched on this a little bit, but this question is for Lance and then Olga. So Lance, April Fool's Day, I think a lot of us saw Silver Oak Petnat, right? You might have been responsible for that. So Silver Oak, one of the biggest names in big blockbuster Napa, making a Petnat. So it's funny. But what happens if that really happens? What happens when big players get into the natural wine game? Lance?
Well, I'm not going to show up on their radar screen, that's for sure. I don't really. I'm fine with all that because, it's going to happen. I think, as you were saying earlier, with these bigger retailers getting into the organic food business, it's happening. It's natural. I don't blame them. Everybody's out there trying to differentiate what they do, and break out of the commodity market. For us, we just have to try to tell our story, as you said, and try to engage directly with as many buyers, as many commercial buyers, as many consumers as we can, get them up to the farm, and prove to them that, we're doing what we really say we're doing. And hopefully the product hunts, hopefully the quality is there as well, so they'll come back to it. But this idea of these big companies, capitalizing on trends, or the buzz styles of the day, that's kind of inevitable. And I think as small producers, we just need to figure out how to keep moving faster.
Right.
So.
Okay, great.
I think it is already happening, and I think what the bigger companies are doing is they're just creating another DBA. So they're not going to use Silver Oak, but they're going to create several different DBAs that look like individual wineries. And I know I have seen wines on the East Coast that are labeled as organic and natural with like this really kind of earthy kind of label, like made out of hemp. And I turn it around and it's some name of an Oregon winery, and I know that Oregon winery does not exist. So I think what they're doing is buying bulk wine from Oregon, calling it something like Green Goddess or something really, and then selling it on the East Coast. I won't find it in Oregon because it'll be called out too quickly, but I've definitely seen it on the East Coast. And so is my husband. When we do sales calls, we're like, this isn't a real wine. This is not a real winery. And they're selling for like $9.99, so easy to sell. And you'll see them stacked at Whole Foods or other natural grocers. And that's another thing that kind of upsets me is that these grocery stores, they charge so much money for an heirloom tomato, and people will spend $5 on an heirloom tomato, but they won't spend more than $9.99 on a bottle of wine. Right. So there's a disconnect between what they're drinking and what they're eating. And I think that awareness, talking about it, writing stories about it, getting it out there to the consumer so they know that they're kind of getting greenwashed.
So as we go into the red wines here, we'll move into one last question for each of the panelists, starting with Jamie and working backwards. So really, what is the future? What should the future be? Should we be looking at certification bodies? Should we get rid of natural and call it honest wine? Should we be looking at what people are doing rather than what they aren't doing? What are your thoughts?
As one of the three managers of the portfolio at the sorting table, I have input along with my business partners on the kind of wineries we're going to bring into the portfolio. We built the portfolio from ground up starting 13 years ago and have changed since that time, and we've moved more in the direction of small family producers than we were 13 years ago, working only with people who farm sustainably, organically, and biodynamically. That wasn't something that we started out as a mission with the sorting table, but we have moved in that direction, and it usually turns out that the people that we really want to work with, that's how they farm anyway. Like, they're raising their children. Sometimes the backyard is their vineyard. Like I said, they're passing this on to the next generation. Those are the people that we're interested in. So as far as like the future that I see with our company, we're going to go more in the direction of natural wine making and organic and biodynamic growing. We don't tell our wineries how to make their wine. The reason that we have picked them and put them in the portfolio is because we love their wine. So we're not in the habit of saying you need to do this, you need to change that. We love your wine, we're going to sell it. But one thing that I do recommend, and now with TTB allowing different organic certifications on American labels, a lot of our wineries are certified, but they don't realize that they can actually, put those certifications on the labels. So that's changing. And also a lot of our wineries have been farming organically or been working towards some kind of certification for years, and we do recommend to them to go ahead and do it. Even though every winery in my portfolio does farm sustainably or organically or biodynamically, they're not necessarily certified. And does it make a difference to me? Absolutely not. I don't care. But when the wine hits the retail shelf, and especially in certain markets as well, it's different selling wine in Boulder than it is selling it in Colorado Springs. Boulder probably wants to see a certification on the back label. If you're going to call it organic, it better say organic. And Colorado Springs, maybe they don't care. Or not to pick on Colorado Springs, but I used to live there, so I can pick on. So that's where I see us moving, and also the wineries that we're interested in are working in a natural way, and if they haven't been for generations, the younger generation that is coming up, the guys who are in their 20s and 30s who are taking over for their fathers are farming and making wine in a more natural way maybe than they have in previous generations.
Yeah, so I think, as far as handling policing or ensuring, truth in advertising, marketing, I'm in favor of third-party verification. So things like going to a third party for, certification of your farming practices. We started out as an organic farm. We didn't really think that there was going to be some premium that we could charge because of it. That's not why we did it, but we just felt like as more and more players got into it, there was value in having some third party verify, right, that you're doing things the way you say you are. In the case of the USDA National Organic Program, of course, that's been watered down over the years as bigger companies have gotten into it. But I personally, and I know there are a lot of problems with these certification programs, but for me, we will continue to use, the NOP, the National Organic Program, and Demeter USA, Demeter International. We believe that they, in particular, as far as natural farming and natural wine growing goes, they've helped us. They are not only a policing organization, but they've really added value. They have helped inform how we do things. So, yeah, I think that's for us. That's where we will continue to go. As far as the marketing and packaging, and how we kind of identify ourselves in the market.
I'm not so sure what the future holds for a natural wine in terms of a marketing or like a third-party certification. All the years that we've been making wine in this country, and we still can't agree on sets of rules for what can or can't be done to wine from certain regions like they have in Europe. So I'm just not sure that our culture is cut out for something quite that sort of rigid. That being said, when I was selling wine 15 years ago, it wasn't, people's perception of organic on the label wasn't always that great. Maybe that's changed since then, because I know the whole local and sustainable movement has certainly exploded in that time period, and so maybe that perception's different now. But to touch on what Jamie was saying, we farm organic and biodynamically, but we choose not to be certified. We just do it because it's the right thing to do, and we're not looking to use that as a marketing tool. Maybe people's perception of that has changed now. I'm not entirely sure. But.
I agree with you, Mark. And when we were farming our Alsea vineyard, we also were farming it organically, and we dabbled with some biodynamics, but we never had any intention of ever actually certifying it, mostly because of the cost, and the vineyard was 2 hours away from us, so it was a very long drive, so we just couldn't be there on the right moon nights and things like that. But I did want to say that in Oregon, the Willamette Valley Vintners Association is now working on passing a bill where all the varietal of a Pinot has to be 100%. Right now, I think it's 90, is that right? 95. And then 95, and you can use the rest of it like Syrah or blend it with something else. And we want to pass it so it has to be 100%. And I think that's really important too. I think people should know exactly if you're saying it's a Pinot, it needs to be 100% Pinot, not 95% Pinot and 5% Malbec and 2% Cabernet. So I think that's cool that they're doing that. But getting back to the label and certification thing, I just know that when I see certified organic, it can be on a Walmart product, and I know that I can go to my local farmer's market and get the best produce, and they don't have that label. So I'm just going to kind of stick to that, because that's just how I feel about it. I don't think we need a label to show that we're doing something better than somebody else.
Yes, well, as I was saying before, the reason why I do organic agriculture is because I trust in my land and not for marketing. After that, I must say I'm certified in the vineyards. are not certified in the cellar because we have a very large law in Italy. So there is a new, the European community just approved the new law about organic wines. You can, in the cellar, you can almost do everything. So, of course, there are big lobby that want to go in this market. It's a big problem because maybe winery that produce 20 million bottles, they do 1 million, maybe less, 500,000 bottles of organic wine with certification on the back label, and they say, look, we are organic. So this is a big problem because they use the job we do to advertise them. So yes, this is a big problem. About the natural wine, I would say in Italy we speak about do certifies also the natural wine. I think we have enough rules in this world, and also making wines, we have enough rules. So I really not looking forward to do that way. But I want to say, the last thing I want to say is that I'm a little bit scary about this fashion, this growing about natural wine. Natural wine is great. I'm super happy to do and to drink natural wine, but natural wine are not for everybody. You need to have you need to be knowledgeable to do that, and you need to be in the right place to do that. So it's I know producers that more and more produce wines that are natural, but they don't advertise the job that we do every day. So this is a problem maybe for the future, to have that this movement can become too fashionable and without substance.
Yeah.
Okay? Sorry for my English, but I'm not very.
That's perfect. Thank you, Piero. So are there any questions in the crowd before we move into a little networking hour? Nathan?
Yeah, the issue that you have, of course, I think you have a responsibility to bring a good product to market, and someone buys the wine, and then within the same case, they have 2 or 3 bottles that are unsaleable. It's our responsibility to return that product, to give a credit to that customer, and to remove it from the market. And sometimes that can be very difficult. We do business in 48 states. In some places that's easy to do, in some places it is not. Sometimes the wine is out there in the world and there's no way to get it back, right? But that's how we have dealt with the issue, and it hasn't happened on too many occasions. But I've been selling wine professionally for 20 years, so I've seen some bad bottles go out. And every company that I've worked for has stood behind, if there is actually a legitimate bottle of wine, we'll take care of it. And for us moving forward, we'll share that information with the winery. Whenever we have a corked bottle or strange bottle, we always ask that the cork be saved because sometimes there's a lot number on there. We will report that back to the winery. We'll make sure that they get the information so they can hopefully go back and find out, what was wrong possibly with that lot. So we do everything within our power, but you're kind of limited by what you can do once the wine's out into the marketplace. So if it is a continuing problem with a specific winery, then that really predicates us saying, sorry, we can't work with you.
Great. Carolyn? Lance, you want to take it?
Yeah, and I think wine is booze, so it's a slippery slope when you start suggesting that there is potential risk in drinking wine because of the mega purple, when the alcohol is going to kill you a lot faster. So I think at the end of the day, we go down a slippery slope if we start talking about the the residual whatever trace elements of pesticides and other things that are in the wine, because again, alcohol, that's just going to prompt the question of, well, this is alcohol, and it's just, there are a lot of bad health implications for that. So I think that's not a good place for us to go. Yeah. Yeah.
They're not going to talk. They're not going to tell you.
Well, I don't know.
A lot of them do.
Yeah.
I mean,
When you have a national distribution like that, and the wine needs to taste the same year in, year out, people expect, it tastes the same. They're using additives and adjuncts like that for sure.
I think if you're a brand and you're making 500,000 to a million cases, and it's going to be the $9.99 grocery store wine, it's got to taste. It's got to be like a Budweiser. Budweiser goes to really great lengths to test and make sure that every Budweiser, no matter which one of the breweries it comes from, tastes exactly like the last Budweiser. And that's where I think these wine brands are doing the same thing. They don't want to challenge people. They don't want to have vintage differences from one year to the next. It's got to taste exactly like it did last year. And sometimes that's just not possible by doing it naturally. So I had to add color this year. I had to add tannin because it didn't taste like it did last year. I had to spin out some of the alcohol because this year was a warmer vintage and it got away from us a little bit. But the wine it's got to be right at 13.8. So all of those manipulations, I think, are exactly opposite of what everybody on this panel is doing. And I think, good winemakers, maybe not even following natural practices, aren't using those practices either because they do want to show what the vintage variation is like. And they're not trying to make a homogenized product. But there's a lot of those wines out there that are. When you buy your McDonald's hamburger, you want to taste like McDonald's hamburger. And if you drink a $10 New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc and that's your favorite thing and that's all you drink, you want it to taste exactly like that every year.
It is another market.
Yep.
Market, another world.
Yep, and it's not, honestly, that's not my customer.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily bad.
Yeah,
either.
that's okay.
I mean, if there's a market for Wonder Bread, great. I mean, the only way we can win as a small producer is to differentiate ourselves through taste, through some sort of taste experience that hopefully is positive, and that is something that the consumer recognizes as the only way you can do this. The only way you create a product like this is on a small scale with a lot of hands-on processes versus industrial tricks and smoke and mirrors. And it either tastes
have another question here?
I was actually going to follow up on our question. So, for most of the 80s and 90s, America was legal to treat seafood with low especially phosphate. Now there was a huge movement in the late 90s, press coming out about TSP and how potentially dangerous it is for you. On that idea, though, with natural wine in general, the certification bodies that you mentioned, like, so the average consumer in the U.S. has no idea what biodynamic is. This market is true. Organic, they understand because of press, it's much more USDA. Where do you think the wine industry is going with treating natural wine and the idea of the label and the print on the label being too confusing for the consumer to understand? So you have organic, or you have a producer that has organic on one line and biodynamic on the other. Would you say, like there's no coloring added certification, no this? Like, do you believe that in the future it should be one certifying body? Do you believe that it should be multiple?
Well, I'll just answer by going back to that Willamette Valley Vintners Association. The topic of ingredients came up, and there was a consensus saying, yeah, we want the ingredients listed on the label. Grapes, what else do you use? Sulfur, we have to put that on there. But are you using megapurple or other chemicals and enzymes? A lot of winemakers say yes, we want it on there. But there's a problem because some winemakers lie and won't tell you the truth. So I don't know how to police it properly, but I think that the wine community, the natural wine community, is trying to take steps toward that. The bigger, larger wine community, the Constellation and those, I think they probably just want to be able to say whatever they want to say without being legally held to anything, which natural wine is at this time. Well, we have the live stamp and Salmon Safe, and some of them put it all on the label right next to each other.
Salmon
So,
safe,
yeah.
organic, Oregon tilth. I agree with you. It's. I think this is what you're suggesting. It could be too much.
Yeah.
Too much information.
Just marketing at the end.
Right.
It
Yes.
become just marketing.
Right.
But I think I'm a little against having one overarching body that says this is how you're going to make the wine, because I think people's negative feelings about organic wine going back 20, 30 years ago is wineries are trying to make USDA certified organic wine, and the bottle was turning brown on the shelf within weeks after arriving. People would buy the wines, they weren't well made, and they were unstable. And so people said, I don't buy organic wine, it's not good. And then I think we've gotten to a different place. You said you haven't sold wine in a long time, but now it's not looked down as, organic biodynamic isn't looked down as a negative. I think it's definitely a positive that I talk about all of the time. But I would prefer to have my wineries, if they want to be part of an organizing body, that it's local, that they have input, that they can sign on or not, and maybe even have, this one is sustainable, but that one's biodynamic, and they can choose how they want to farm, they can choose if they want to be a part of an organization, which one. Again, it comes down to we don't want to tell our wineries what to do. We want to represent their wines because we love them. And when it comes down to if you want to be certified, then you should have your choice. If it's one big certification body in the United States, we will screw it up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, Jackie.
I'm not in the wine industry, but I'm passionate about natural wine, and so I have a lot of friends ask me, how do I go into a store and know that a wine is natural? Other than not shopping the grocery store, do you have any suggestions as to what to tell them?
Good question.
Strike up a relationship with the wine steward.
Yeah.
Right? All of you.
Yeah, honestly, because there's no natural wine certification stamp, there's really no way to know. That's why you rely on a good wine steward, a good wine shop, and a sommelier. They should know the story.
Yeah, on the back of our label, our little tagline is old and cold, high and dry, wood and wild. So old vines, high elevation, cool vineyard sites so we can hang the fruit longer for more phenolic ripening without the sugar levels going up. And wood for barrel fermentation, and then wild for the wild yeast. So that kind of encapsulates what we do.
Yeah.
So, yes, along those lines. Oh, yeah.
I've always liked that on the back here. It's a real compressed way to describe it. Our back label says "Drink the wine you like." So, but we also do have a QR code. I think that's what they're called, and it takes you right to our website with all the fact sheets and whatnot. So hopefully people use it.
Carolyn, did you have a question? Yeah. Any comments from the?
Sustainable is kind of the same thing as natural wine.
Yeah.
When you say sustainable, when I say sustainable, it means that they're not certified in either organic or biodynamic. But when I say it, I actually mean it. They don't use herbicides, they don't use pesticides, they don't use chemicals, they use organic fertilizers. In some instances, they follow some biodynamic processes, but they don't go through every single biodynamic process where they could be certified. Some of it is,
Very large production
yeah.
companies that say that size peak look, and sometimes I ask them, what does that mean? And they tell me that.
Yeah.
So
I
maybe
mean,
that's
honestly,
happening.
sometimes I have wineries that only use solar panels. They recycle and filter all of their wastewater. They burn their farm, the leftover cuttings and things from their farm to make electricity. You know, all of those things, is that, part of sustainability? Yeah, absolutely. But would I expect every winery to be able to do that? No, not necessarily.
I think sustainable is a very borderline word. I mean, I want to say all and nothing. So it's sustainable for you that you drink the wine, or sustainable for the winery that make the wine. Sustainable maybe can be also that I try to be sustainable, but if it's raining a lot, if I'm in trouble, because I'm not certified as organic, I can spray the right synthesis product to stop the pollution. You know what I mean? So sustainable, it's a word that is used more and more from the big company. They are not organic, but they are sustainable. So why do they don't say organic? This is sustainable. So it's, to be honest, it's a word I don't like very much.
Yeah.
It's not clear.
Any other final questions? Well, we want to thank our panelists very much for joining us for Colorado Natural Wine Week, and thank you everyone for coming today. And we'll be kind of wrapping up slowly. So if you have one-on-one questions you want to ask, and we could take our time, kind of having a few minutes together, because I know as sommeliers and buyers throughout the city, we don't get to interact as often as we'd like. So definitely take your time leaving, and thank you again for coming. And thank you. And thank you, Nocturne, for hosting.
You got to be able to set it up and take it in. Yeah.
I had a question for you, Mark.
Yeah, sure.